Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week we get to learn Peter Pan's origin story. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a real-life tightrope walker, and Andrew Garfield falls victim to the housing crisis in 99 Homes. We'll also review stop-motion animated comedy Hell and Back, and in our home media moment, Adult Beginners. Horror Month continues with my pick, this time for old classic, one of the true classics, The Birds. And for our Oscar A to Z, Robert Redford and Jane Fonda are Barefoot in the Park. As Halloween is approaching and one of our films deals directly with this subject, our top 5 is our favorite movies where people go to or are in hell. But first up, we start with Pan, a pretty disappointing weekend at the box office.
It was panned, actually.
It was panned by critics, so let's see what we think of this film. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this is an origin story of Peter Pan, Captain Hook, and others, created specifically for this film and acting as a prequel to the famous story we're all familiar with, written by J.M. Barrie. Levi Miller plays Peter, Garrett Hedlund is James Hook, Rooney Mara plays Tiger Lily, and Hugh Jackman is the villain pirate Blackbeard. Peter is an orphan child who learns that his friends from the home are all being captured by pirates, and soon he finds himself as one of them. He teams up with James and Tiger Lily to try and find his mother while attempting to also defeat Blackbeard. It was directed by Joe Wright, typically known for more period fare like Atonement and Pride and Prejudice. Now, I was really looking forward to this film. I thought it looked cute, that Jackman looked like he would portray a cool villain, and I will give Pan this. Jackman is certainly having fun with the role, and Miller is adorable and an all-right young actor. But that is literally where the positives stop.
Oh.
This movie is atrocious.
Yikes.
First of all, when the characters sing Nirvana and Ramones songs, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Now, we can go back and forth all day about whether that works when Baz Luhrmann does it, but at least his films are consistent in that regard. This one does it for 2 scenes in a row, it makes no sense, and then never broaches it again.
That was really weird.
It was super weird, and I knew it was coming because I had read the article. I didn't know the Ramones one was in there, but I knew Teen Spirit was.
I knew about that.
The direction here is horrible. Just about every scene features Peter falling down, and then a shot from his perspective on the ground, and then the camera gets up with him. The CGI is uninspired and obvious, and Hedlund and Mara have zero chemistry and give terrible performances in general. Now, there's also been some controversy about having Mara even in the film, as Tiger Lily is typically portrayed as a Native American, but let me assure them, being in the movie is punishment enough. Pan is a D.
Wow.
Justin? Somewhere between Tim Burton, Baz Luhrmann, and some traces of Sam Raimi at times is Joe Wright's attempt at doing a family film. The result is, for lack of a better word, chaotic. It's kind of gloriously chaotic, but ultimately incredibly, incredibly chaotic. Where I have to give this movie some points is, for the first 10, 15 minutes, I was excited. I was thinking to myself, this is the movie everyone's panning. It's certainly not like Lego Movie family film caliber, but it's okay. And surprisingly, the more and more we get into the fantastic, the more the quality goes down. Jackman's good, but I think he's hamming it up a little too much. Garrett Hedlund's basically, I assume, trying to do a Harrison Ford impersonation and just failing miserably.
Seemed like he was going in that direction, yeah.
First hookman in baseball.
Mara is working with whatever she's got. I don't blame her. I blame more or less the faulty script. And Amanda Seyfried ruins everything. But here's the thing.
She's in like 2 seconds of the movie.
Yeah,
you're right.
She wasn't right.
Come on. It's like blaming Jack Black for Sex Tape.
That's fair.
He was like the best part.
Actually, he was.
However, I do have to give it a couple points. I did like the production quality and the costumes. I hated the Luhrmann-esque pop culture song things. I'm glad they were only in 2 scenes, but I don't understand why they were there at all. I feel like some of the CGI worked well in some scenes, others not quite so much. The mermaid scene I loathed
Me too.
so much.
They were all clones.
Yes, of Cara Delevingne.
Just like, why? If
you're gonna have... she ran from the paper towns.
Yes.
Now she lives underwater.
I'm just like,
they're all connected.
I get she's pretty and all, but like, wouldn't you want to have different mermaids instead of one race of one clone mermaid? It was a weird scene.
Yeah, yeah, it was a missed opportunity. This whole movie was more or less of a missed opportunity.
It should be a review right there.
It's another classic case of movies that almost made my most anticipated, and I'm very glad they weren't. I leave this one with a C.
Well, I also had pretty high expectations. I thought it looked really good.
As did I. The trailers were fantastic.
Yeah, I do admit you're right. The part at the orphanage at the beginning was intriguing. But then, literally, as soon as they get on the boat, everything just nosedives. Joe, what did you think of Pan?
I think that a complete nosedive is a little extreme. I do agree that the first part of the film is definitely the most intriguing. And I was kind of with Justin, like, all right, this movie's been panned. Really, it's just been given this harsh receiving by critics. But I'm thinking to myself, this is all right. It's not that bad. I mean, it's not that inspired, but it's not terrible. But as it keeps going, it just made me feel like, even though it's supposed to be really fantastic, it's somehow mostly kind of dull. Like, it's lacking in some energy to make it pop. And I think it might be the performances, might be some of the effects, some of the direction and editing. But there was a lot of good speckled throughout the movie. I do agree that the weird pop music choice was bizarre. But I do agree if they've been consistent with it, maybe like they were saying that there's this rebellious element that's fused in the culture of Neverland, and they just kept doing that, okay. But
why are we doing that in World War II?
Exactly. It's timeless, I guess. I don't know. It was weird. And that's pretty much how the whole movie is. It's just weird. But like I said, there are some good things. I thought the performances were okay. I thought that the look of the film, there was some of it that actually looked decent. I thought some of the shots were good. Some of the effects were all right. But it was very mixed. I think you put a good example, like when he goes off into the ship and he's in space floating around, it's just proportions are all over the place. You don't really know what's going on. There's a couple dream sequences of like obvious plot points where they have like a log of memory and then a pool of memory where you're watching events happen, but it's all blurry and you're not really sure what's going on half the time.
The first one I actually really liked. It was the second one that was like, well, where is this going?
They did it again. Like everything has memory here, I guess. And that to me, I mean, I'll say this though. I thought the costumes were great, especially Jackman. I thought he looked awesome. I thought the costume was great. The make was great. He was having a good time with it. I thought he was a decent villain. But like pretty much every other character, he was kind of underdeveloped. And I mean, and it was also because we don't really care that much about these characters. We don't know much about them. There's not that much tension in the movie. And that's my biggest problem with it, is that it kind of led to some serious plot holes. Like towards the end of the film, we find out what Pan can do, and it involves the Pixies. But the question is, if he has this ability, why was there ever a problem with the Pixies, where they were in danger of being wiped out? And then why is there ever going to be a problem again with Hook later on? Because the film ends and you're supposed to think, oh, they're going to be enemies one day. But literally, if it wasn't for a throwaway line at the ending, there would be no reason to think they're ever going to have a rivalry of any kind.
Right.
Like, it was just so poorly developed, and like Justin said, a lot of missed opportunity. It's kind of frustrating in that sense. Blackbeard, I thought he was a fun villain, but his plan literally is one of the dumbest in like cinema history. Because his goal in the movie is to get all the pixie dust so he can basically stay youthful. Okay, that's cool. But his plan is to find the Pixie Kingdom and wipe them out. Buddy, if you wipe out the pixies,
Right.
no more pixie dust.
Ergo death.
So I was like, oh, this script really needed some time to be fleshed out. I don't think it was terrible, but it's a very mixed bag. I'm with Justin on this one. I'll leave it with the C.
Well, it's a rare event when I am the lowest on a kids movie.
Yeah, I don't know. And I have to say,
It's really bad.
Did
No,
you-
I'm not going to fight you on your grade.
No,
it's terrible.
I'm cool with it, but I wanted to ask you guys, though, did you think it was tonally off? Because I felt like
At times.
they were trying to be really dark, right? There's people dying, getting
Sometimes.
shot. I'm thinking, let's go for the blood and gore if we're going to have this dark, gritty Pan. But then they like poof into like colorful smoke, and I'm like,
the smoke was all this like,
I'm like,
colored smoke came out of their guns.
if you're going to be
and
silly
killed
about
people.
it, fine. There's a way to balance it, but I'm just like, it just looked odd. Like, pick a tone you're going with here, buddy. Because most of the movie's dark and grim, but then they'll throw in this random colorful stuff for kids, and I'm like,
Yeah, compare that to the opening 10 minutes at the orphanage.
like, oh yeah,
Where there's a whole bombing.
It's basically like
Luftwaffe.
Pulp Fiction, compared to. Yeah, no, you're right. It was very tonally off. I thought the direction just didn't make any sense. It was bizarre. Like I just the shots. Like most movies that we watch, I feel like if the direction is just sort of good, then you don't really notice it. You only really notice direction if it's particularly engaging,
yeah.
or terrible. I couldn't stop noticing the bad shots in this movie.
Particularly when they're trying to play around with 3D, which...
Yeah.
The 3D wasn't that good here, for sure. For something shot in 3D.
The 3D was good in spots. The aspects that were driving me craziest the most was when they kept deciding to switch up the aspect ratio and have things stick out of the screen to make sure that, in case you didn't know, this movie wasn't 3D. It drove me crazy.
Well, that's the problem, and we talked about this last week with The Martian. I mean, that's the problem with a lot of 3D movies, even one shot in 3D, is they go for that, let's throw things like they're coming towards you. To me, I think the better 3D effect is to just give you the atmospheric 3D.
The full scale other than just the gimmick.
Yes. So, I agree. The 3D didn't really do anything for me, certainly. Did you happen to see it in 3D, Joe?
2D.
Okay. No, you missed nothing.
I was going to say.
All right. Well, let's move on here. We've got actually another 3D movie, and that is The Walk. Justin?
Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays Philippe Petit, a French high-wire artist with a love for spectacle and achieving a never-ending supply of attention. However, when his focus gets drawn on the Twin Towers in America, circa 1974, he quickly starts training and building a team of accomplices, including his own girlfriend, played by Charlotte Le Bon, to pull it off, regardless of if he loses his life in the process. I consider The Walk a sort of two-layer love story, if you will. The first, and probably foremost, is Petit and his love of the spectacle, love of the whole atmosphere, and genuinely fueling his own ego. The second layer, and probably the more problematic one, is Zemeckis' love for the overall concept, often turning it Hollywoodized. Now, I'll start with the positive. After A Christmas Carol, which I thought was flawed but okay, and Flight, which I just thought was a complete missed opportunity.
Even if it was upside down?
Even if it was upside down, Joe.
Okay.
I wondered if Zemeckis could ever get back to his good old-fashioned Back to the Future glory days. And lo and behold, for the most part, I think he can. Now, I'm not going to say it was on par with Who Framed Roger Rabbit or Back to the Future, but what is here that reminded me of those so much is Zemeckis' sense of wonder. You get drawn into this world so well, and he complements it with a 3D instead of turning it into gimmicks. They're smartly placed, and they come to life when they're needed. Does it sometimes embellish Petit as a character? Definitely, but such is also the character. Where the film tends to go south a little bit is when he does choose to Hollywoodize it, adding on this incredibly over-the-top and melodramatic score by Alan Silvestri that has about as much subtlety as Hans Zimmer's loud, booming organ from Interstellar that ruins the subtlety of probably one of the best shot sequences of the year in the climax. The Walk is a very good movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's certainly not without its flaws. I leave The Walk with an A-.
Joe?
Still waiting for that I- to come back one day. Well, as you guys know, I wasn't really that interested in the plot of this one. I don't know why, just this guy endangering his life for the purpose of just getting the thrill of doing it.
You don't like that?
I don't really like that sort of thing generally, but I still think this movie was well done. I think what surprised me the most was the way that the trailers presented it. I thought it was going to be done in this kind of a super realistic fashion, but it was kind of taking into account the spectacle, and it was more grand, and I would even border on like cartoony in some ways. Not in the worst way, but it was very fun, and it had this mystical quality to the story, especially with Levitt's narration. I kind of liked his mastery of the French accent. It actually was very convincing. I liked it a lot. I liked him as a character. I thought he was fun, and I did understand his perspective through his passion of it, which I thought was kind of the center of the film and probably the best thing about it. I thought it was well shot, for sure. I thought the editing was great. I thought that the story flowed very well, considering how much was really packed in, and you're able to follow along fairly well. And I was surprised that it wasn't all necessarily about the caper itself, but build up to it. You learn a little bit more about the person, some of the people in his life that help him. A little bit of a romance there, too, though really a little underdeveloped. And I think that was one of my main issues with the movies. I felt that a lot of the other characters were kind of pushed aside, and they were almost caricatures, especially this one guy who was kind of a drug addict, I suppose, and he seemed really, really off to me. Like, he wasn't even really a person. I'm sure he was there, but his portrayal just really stuck out to me as some of the minor things with this movie. Like, it was a little too quirky, I think, to let us dive into what this man's life was really about. Like, you got a sense of it through the atmosphere, but I still felt like it's one of those movies that is a little safe. But despite that safeness, it was very engaging, and most of my problems with it were really minor. I leave it with an A.
Wow. Okay. Well, you'll hear some echoing here. Joseph Gordon-Levitt gives a fantastic performance, as he typically does, but we don't usually hear him doing so much with the accents. Mm-hmm. I thought his French accent was flawless. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed his narration as well. I liked the framing shots of him at the Statue of Liberty with the Twin Towers behind him whenever they went back to that. Cool. I thought that was cool. I thought that the 3D did complement Zemeckis' great direction. And here's an example of, Justin, I think there's probably a couple of times where things sort of come out at you. Certainly, whatever that stick is that he holds, that kind of pops out at the beam? One point. Yeah, the balancing beam thing. But unlike in a Pan, I think it complements the story, because the story is all about this death-defying stunt kind of guy, and it really sort of, envelops the audience in the story that way. I do think there's a lot of interesting shots. The finale is fantastic, very tense.
On edge of your seat, really.
Yeah, but I do agree with Justin. I thought specifically the one classical piece that Silvestri used, or maybe that wasn't even him and his orchestra, maybe that was just the CD, but yeah, I mean, come on. You could let that scene breathe a little bit.
I like that.
But I also think that we could have used more background on his family, his motivation for doing this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The romance obviously is underdeveloped, But overall, I enjoyed it. Not quite as much as you guys. I leave it with a B+. And I do think Joe, I know you haven't, but for the audience members as well, if you haven't watched the documentary about this Man on Wire, I think both movies have different advantages, and I think they complement each other very well.
Agreed.
I mean, that's a great documentary. Did it win Best Documentary? Because I think it did, right?
Yes.
And I think it was deserved. It's a great documentary about this guy, and you get, I think, a more complete picture that way, whereas you get the more
grandiose
flair for the dramatic with Zemeckis' version.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
I thought that was the point, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, to be fair, I thought it was just going along with what it was. Mm-hmm. Because there already was the documentary, which apparently a lot of people know about. What would you say you liked it more or less than this?
I would say it was more. I gave that either an A or an A-. That was a really, really strong documentary.
I was going to say A or A+ for me.
Yeah. I mean, this was, close and very good. But I think it does give you maybe a more complete picture in the documentary than we see here. And there's also more, if I remember correctly, with the actual caper itself. Here it really boils down to the last 25 minutes maybe of the movie and nothing else. And we hear him talk a lot about, I did some tests today, I took some pictures today. But in the documentary, I feel like
they get into the intricacies.
Yeah, they really, really explain here's exactly what he did. Mm-hmm. Which I don't think we got here. And I don't think we needed to. I think each film stands on its own as a great piece of cinema.
Oh, yeah. It's all about what kind of story you want to tell.
Right. Joe, you did see this in 3D or no?
2D. I still thought visually it looked great, though.
Yeah.
I could tell that. See, even though I didn't see it in 3D, things still popped out at me. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was impressive.
Well, that's good.
So I thought if I could tell that without seeing it in 3D, pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think Zemeckis really does have a good knack for that. Mm-hmm. I agree that Flight wasn't the best. But
was that in 3D?
No, it wasn't, thank God.
I was about to say, what?
Those courtroom scenes.
Just like the gavel. Bang, bang.
But Christmas Carol was.
Yeah.
And certainly a lot of his other ones. I mean, if they had 3D in the Roger Rabbit days, obviously that's something that would have been.
Surprised there hasn't been a re-release of that in 3D. It'd be pretty cool.
It's a good point. One final thought about the walk, though.
Oh, get back on that.
It ends on such a sad note, thinking about the events of 9/11.
Yeah.
And the movie was dedicated to the families of the victims of 9/11, and that's fine. But it's such an uplifting story overall. I don't know what the way is around that.
I thought that was actually a good send-off. The whole movie was kind of, byproduct on the side of kind of honoring the towers and the idea of them, what they stood for.
Yeah, it's certainly like a love letter to the towers.
Yeah, so,
But it's hard not to leave that movie
and not think about
and
that.
not think about it.
I mean, but you're supposed to think about it. I mean, obviously they didn't say it, but
Right.
there was a very slow shot fading out.
Yes, there was.
It was
And
obvious,
it
but
bummed me out.
But I thought by the spirit of the movie that was hopeful, because he loved him so much, and you have to think. I don't know if they said in the documentary. I don't know if he's still alive. When did he die? He's still alive.
He's still alive,
Oh, well,
actually.
then I'm sure in the documentary they had to have mentioned something about his thoughts because he loved the towers so much, right? Something.
It's been about 5 years. I don't remember.
I don't think they actually went there.
Because
I don't think they did either.
I mean, they didn't mention it at all. Okay, that's interesting.
I know he
because
has spoken about it, but I
Well,
don't think he did so in the documentary.
You just have to know, because it was his dream. His life goal was based around these towers. You have to think he was deeply upset by this.
Yeah, that's actually why I was hoping the way they were going to end it was they talk about basically the legacy it left. Maybe go to like a epilogue title card.
Nothing.
And then we get like a personal perspective from the real Philippe
Yeah. That's what's weird.
talking about nine.
And for bios,
that would have been cool.
to be honest, for a bio,
I agree.
It was weird they didn't have like a little after thing like most do.
Well, they try to do that with the whole
He
narration.
sort of does it himself, yeah.
Kind of, but I mean, it would have been nice to like get like a cut. I would have been, you know what I would have been fine? It might have been jarring a little bit, but just a random cut of like a brief interview about him talking about it now would have been kind of great. Like, it's like, I loved it. I loved
it
the
would have
towers.
been.
It was very sad.
I guess
but,
maybe stepping a little bit on the toes of the documentary,
But you know what?
I feel like if they're gonna, if you're right, Joe, and they want us to feel that at the end of the movie, they could have done that a little bit differently with maybe his own thoughts on it.
Something.
But to just not mention the tragedy at all and to just show those towers like that, I sort of left with like a, ugh, it's so awful that happened.
Be positive. I mean, you're not supposed to be. I mean, you will get to be a little sad, but
Sure.
that's not how you're supposed to look at it.
Okay.
I think that's what they were trying
To me, it was a little bit juxtaposed.
I mean, I could get that.
Yeah.
I understand it, but I was trying to look at it a different way. Though I was thinking, wow, this could be potentially depressing.
Interesting shot to end on.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about it many times during the movie.
Yeah, but to be honest, up until that point, they didn't really touch on that at all. And for them to touch on it in kind of a subtle way, I thought that was clever. I like the fact that it was subtle, though. At the same time, like, we all know, let's talk about how great the towers could be without talking about this, because everyone has talked about it.
And I understand that, but I also feel like you have to. I don't think
skirting the issue
is going to do any favors.
No, I mean, I agree. It would have been nice to hear, but I still think the way they did it was fine. I think it was dignified. It was okay,
All right, well, up next is 99 Homes. That's going to be with Joe.
99 Homes, which is a.k.a. Spidey vs. Zod, according to Justin, is an American thriller directed by Ramin Barani and written by Barani and Nadiri. I guess this was an Iranian production company. It was interesting, actually. The film stars Andrew Garfield, Michael Shannon, and Laura Dern. It's set in Florida, and the film follows a single father, Dennis Nash, who is Garfield, and his family as they are evicted from their home by this evil businessman, Rick Carver, played by Shannon, forcing Nash to help Carver into evicting homes of people in exchange for getting his own home back. And it's about Garfield's descent into the parallels of what he originally hated and seeing that really rough fact of the real estate crisis, circa 2009 or 10. I didn't know much about this movie. It was just kind of assigned to me, as they are with podcasts. I knew it had something vaguely to do with the real estate crisis, and that's literally it. But I gotta say, I was pretty surprised by how fantastic this film was for me. Really, it's very rare to see a film just deal with something that uncomfortable and do it in a fairly realistic and believable manner, but still have this subtle power to it. And I thought the performances here were great. I thought Shannon was a vile on the surface, but complicated individual in his own way. I thought that Garfield probably gave the best performance I've ever seen him give. I thought it was some really moving stuff there. I thought they had great chemistry. I thought it was well shot. I thought it flowed very well. It does end on kind of this bitter note, and I kind of want to know a little more, but I thought that it was just a powerful tale, and it really dealt with this really difficult subject matter in a very mature way, and not exactly offering a lot of answers, but just showing how difficult something like this can be. It was really powerful. I thought it was an amazing film, and I leave it with an A+.
Wow, very good. I'm with you in the going into this sort of blindly. I knew who was in it. I knew it was vaguely about the housing crisis, but that was really it. And I think that this movie has a tight script, good performances that really do keep it afloat. And it reminded me, in that regard, of another film we reviewed for New Classic about 2 years ago, and that's Margin Call. 99 Homes takes this sort of dry subject matter, like the housing market, bank foreclosures, and makes it a very personal and interesting and thrilling story. Now, you mentioned in the synopsis that it is sort of classified as a thriller.
Apparently.
I think of it more as a drama than anything else. There's a few scenes where there's certainly some things happening.
I would say it's a drama overall, but there's definitely some thriller aspects to it.
Yeah. But I would say the drama is
key.
At the heart of this movie. Even more so than movies like Margin Call. This one really does put you in that position and asks questions of the audience like, what would you do if this was your family? How far do you sell your soul to keep your family safe and a roof over their head?
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Joe. There's not really a lot of answers that this movie offers up, and that's because there are no answers. I mean, like, it's, it's
a gray area.
It's a terrible, terrible situation that, maybe not millions, but maybe millions of people have faced in the last, few years.
Carver, Shannon's character, does have, like, this little speech where he kind of says, like, I didn't want it to be this way, or for the banks to let this happen, for the government to let this happen. It just kind of happens, and I just do what I can with it to survive. And it's just, it's one thing about our society, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
But it's something that maybe should be taken a look into. And the film does suggest that, but it's not saying anything specific.
Yeah.
It's just...
And in that regard, we see Garfield in this movie, his character, having to evict people that he knows. I mean, who wants to face that,
Yeah.
I think Shannon is still one of the kings of overacting.
Okay.
He's better here than usual. I would say Zod is supposed to be over the top, so I guess I don't count that quite in the Shannon normal repertoire.
It's acceptable there, yeah.
It's acceptable there. So other than maybe Zod, I would say this is his best performance.
Okay.
And I agree, Garfield here is very, very good as well. I think the script unfolds well. I leave 99 Homes with an A-, but I certainly would like to revisit it before the end of the year.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Justin?
By Justin's grimace, he either agreed or it's like a D.
Or not.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
If I could describe this film in 3 words, they would be like this: raw and loaded. The first 2/3 of this movie are packed with energetic and intense performances from Garfield and Shannon, as well as some smart commentary about the role of banks in society, the real estate crisis. I could go on all day. But then we start heading into this incredibly heavy-handed third act, filled with innumerous shots of cute children being kicked out of their homes, and until we're basically shouting at the screen, "We get it. Banks are evil." Seriously, you don't need the 3,000 guilty shots. And from that, we get increasingly hammy overacting. Shannon a little bit. I thought more Garfield actually in this regard.
So hammy.
I mean, I'll agree with you, Dan. Shannon does have a tendency to overact. I'd say, for me, his best performance will always be Take Shelter.
I thought he did well in The Iceman.
Not one of my favorites.
A little bit more subtle, but...
I don't understand why you like
that one.
Iceman.
I didn't see.
I liked his performance in The Iceman.
He gave a good performance. The movie was not so good.
I'm a mafia guy. I like The Iceman.
Yes, we
okay?
get it.
Oh wait,
Jeff.
I did see that one.
Bang, bang,
Yeah,
bang.
no.
He didn't overact in it, though.
Shannon
He
kills
always
people. Shannon
overacts.
kills more
No, he doesn't.
people.
He's like,
Roll credits.
I'm Michael Shannon, and I'm grimacing. What
Maybe-
about... Okay.
Maybe it's his face. I don't know.
What about 8 Mile? Did he overact in that?
You know what? I'd have to go back. That was before I even knew who he was. I didn't even know he was in 8 Mile.
He's screwing Kim Basinger, and he doesn't care. So he's not... Can't be, like, non-acting. I don't know. Come back to that later, I guess.
The movie's good. I wish it was great. If it was the first 2/3, it would be a B+ or an A-. But because of that incredibly hammy last 15-20 minutes, I leave with the B.
I didn't get the ham. I really didn't see the ham, man. I mean, maybe a little bit pushy, I admit, especially towards the end, but it worked for me. I thought it was selling the message home and was trying to leave you with something powerful at the end. I thought the ending was intense.
No. The ending was incredibly intense. It was the incredibly heavy-handed, oh, okay, let's here's where we are now.
Well, I didn't think it was heavy-handed so much as just kind of showing how terrible it was. I mean,
It is terrible. We don't need to get clubbed over the head with that. I don't think you're going to find anyone who watches this movie who's not going to say, this is a terrible situation.
I know, but I didn't think it was really that excessive, personally. What do you think? Do you think it was too
Well,
much?
much like my grade, I sort of split the difference between you guys on that issue. I mean, I do feel like it was probably a little much, but
It's a
pretty heavy situation. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered Justin, but I have to say I did notice it. It's a bad situation. I didn't really think that they were trying to, like you said, Justin, everyone knows it's a rotten situation. I don't think
Well, then don't make a movie.
they're
about it.
necessarily like saying...
show the details. I mean, kids get kicked out of their homes. A lot of kids get kicked out of their homes. I mean, show that. Fine. Why not? I mean, you could have the whole movie and not show that. You're right, people know it sucks, but you wouldn't experience it by viewing it. Like, oh, these kids got kicked out of their homes. We'll forget about that instantly as opposed to being shown that.
I mean, first time around, okay, I get it. It's his first time doing it. The heartstrings are gonna get tugged. He's gonna get emotional in some way or another because he's become what he hates. Time number 8, though.
Well,
enough is enough.
Justin, look at it this way. If he has to do this over and over again and it gets to him over time, seeing this over and over again is going to build up.
That's what makes him snap.
Unless you want to see him getting numb to it, which is a direction that could have gone. You're
Which
right.
I would argue, to some extent, he does get a little numb.
He does, but not ultimately.
Not ultimately. You're right about that,
I think
Joe.
he starts out more numb. I mean, no, I should say, I guess he's more numb in the middle.
Yes.
Because he's sort of...
Gets that money.
Yeah, like he starts out not feeling it, but I have to do this for my family. Then he gets numb to it. And then he sort of comes back around and says, dude, this is not cool what we're doing here.
This is messed up.
Yeah. Well, now, in that regard, Justin, what did you think of the final blowout scene?
The lead up to the climax,
Yeah.
I really, really liked.
See, me too. I thought that was one of the strongest scenes.
I thought that was a good setup.
Okay.
However, that leads to the final shot of the movie, which I hated so much. Oh, I'm going to answer to you. I was literally staring at the screen. You could have literally just put him in the car. Roll credits. Mm-hmm. Easy B+. Instead, we get that incredibly loaded shot.
I do agree that a couple of lines probably didn't need to be there. I mean, it didn't really affect me in the same super negative way, but
I was fine with it.
I do agree that it was a bit, to use Justin's word, loaded, I guess, in that regard. But I don't know. I didn't think it was overly hammy or...
I thought it was intense.
Yeah.
And that was the point.
No, intense is a good way to describe it. It's just... I feel like the more Garfield gets pushed there, the more it requires out of him, and I don't think he's up to the task just yet.
See, I thought he fit the role perfectly. I'm really thinking of Ham, and I don't see it. Maybe a little over, but I just don't think it hammy. Maybe Shannon hammy, but not Garfield.
a little bit.
I mean, Shannon's
Shannon-hammy.
a little hammy, but I just kind of his acting style, I guess.
It's definitely reeled in
He likes his,
than in certain other films.
I'm the bad guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Premium Rush was the worst of
You
the
guys
ham.
always bring that up.
Court in agreement.
Michael Shannon, I mean, come on.
He was the bad guy in that?
He was like
Yes.
evil, corrupt cop.
Was he evil? Like, was he trying to stop him from delivering the
Yes.
Blake messages?
Yes, and he's going to kill him if he delivers it, and
What?
Yeah.
it's too much, honestly.
If it sounds ridiculous, it's because it basically
Well, to be
is.
fair, he's in Premium Rush, so I mean,
That I know.
how seriously
That
are you
whole
gonna take
movie,
it?
man. It's what put Gordon-Levitt up on the wire. He's like, I got to get off the bike path.
Gotta get out of the traffic.
Get up on the wire. Well, let's move on here. We've got Hell and Back, and this is featuring Nick Swardson, Mila Kunis, Bob Odenkirk, and T.J. Miller. They head up this stop-motion R-rated comedy in which some amusement park workers discover a portal to hell, and because of a welched bat, find themselves there. They soon realize they need to escape, or they will be sacrificed. Susan Sarandon, Danny McBride, Jennifer Coolidge, David Koechner, and Michael Pena also have roles. I have nothing good to say about this film. Other than Swardson and McBride, I like pretty much everyone in the cast, so how on earth did any of them agree to do this? I mean, these are some really good comedic actors. Susan Sarandon. The animation is ugly and uninspired,
Yikes.
and the script is absolutely atrocious. When it's not a fart joke, it's a penis joke. When it's not one of those, it's a rape joke, and
Yikes.
one that they keep going back to scene after scene. It's beyond horrible. There is one clever gag in the entire movie, and they do go to it a few times, but it's not near enough. This movie is a clear F.
Jeez.
Joe, you missed a big loser here.
It's true you guys weren't telling me to go see it, so...
Nope.
That's pretty crazy.
So, Justin, let's hear from you on Hell and Back.
Man.
I can only imagine if I gave this an F.
Well, I don't know. Justin likes the potty humor, though. So, it could be higher. Sometimes he does.
Well, now we know why this was shelved for so long. Hell and Back's certainly not the most fluent claymation, like it's not. And the voice acting is spotty, borderline painful at times.
Nice.
I thought Odenkirk was okay.
Yeah, some of the voice performers did an okay job. Rob Riggle was okay as the one guy.
And I think once they're actually situated in hell, there's a few moments that border on guilty pleasure that can be considered mildly amusing. I'm not going to say funny. The storyline is blah. None of the characters are particularly that likable. And
the devil's one of the more likable characters.
I was going to say for the first, I want to say 2 acts, I was more or less like, the devil's really not that bad.
Right.
Huh. Interesting.
I'm not going to fail it because I did chuckle a couple times, but it's really not a good movie. I leave this one with a D-.
Man, Justin, the list of movies failed by you this year, and not this one. I maybe cracked a smile one time. Can't say I laughed at all. A chuckle would be too high a praise for this movie. I didn't even chuckle.
Man.
I'm not saying it was the greatest comedy ever, but
Certainly not, but I don't know. A comedy's number one goal to me would be to make you laugh, and if it can't do that, looks ugly, is making huge light of rape and other things.
Well, it's hell.
All right, Joe, the one good gag in the film.
Okay.
I'm curious about
I'm going to put quotes around the word good.
Okay.
Okay.
Acceptable.
But, like for example, I don't know if the people behind Robot Chicken did this, but it's certainly in that style.
Okay.
Like if this appeared as a go-to recurring gag in an episode of Robot Chicken,
I
would be on board, let's say.
the guy getting hit by the nuts by a flying rock or something.
Yeah,
That's
basically.
kind of funny, yeah.
Okay, so the whole thing is that hell isn't really that bad. Okay. And there's this one guy who's sort of like a clerk or a customer service person, and basically whatever somebody wants, it's just a shade off. Like they have a Pizza Hut Taco Bell combo down there. Okay. And the guy wants a pizza, but they only do the Taco Bell part. And they go back to that well with different venues about 4 times.
It's kind of funny.
It's like a little bit clever, but that's literally it. I mean, that's the only part that I thought was okay. That's.
I guess if you hate Taco Bell, but I mean it's not the worst. Just never could get that pizza.
Right. Yeah. So then he keeps asking for the pizza, and oh no, we only serve tacos, but your sign says Pizza Hut. Oh yeah, welcome to hell. I mean, it's okay. It's like an okay line.
That's kind of funny.
And if that was on Robot Chicken, it would be funny.
Yeah, that's like a 2-second
bit.
But
as a 2-second bit in a hour-and-a-half movie,
it's
not so much. Let's move on to the home media moment, and that is adult beginners. Justin?
Nick Kroll plays Jake, an aspiring entrepreneur, until his company's launch completely crashes, and he's left with no choice but to live with his pregnant sister, Justine, played by Rose Byrne, and his brother-in-law, played by Bobby Cannavale. The two find Jake a hassle at first, but when they reluctantly task him with being a nanny for their son, Jake soon discovers that even he has some growing up to do. Now, this is about as generic as the whole irritating jerk has to live with family and becomes a better person stories go. And I can't really say it's a plus or a minus there. There are a few mildly funny bits, but with a cast including Rose Byrne, Nick Kroll, and Joe McHale, all three having proven to some degree that they can be successful in comedy in some form, whether or not I personally agree with it.
You do hate Joe McHale.
Really?
Do I?
Don't like Community?
I think so.
I like Community.
I was going to say it. What I've seen of Community I've liked.
We hated that one. What was the horror movie he was on?
But that's not a comedy.
No, but he was the comedic relief.
I thought he was funny in that, though.
I thought he was too, but...
I was cheering for his demise, but anyhow. But because of that track record, I was hoping it would be somewhat more memorable than this. But instead, it's just by the numbers and fluffy and, frankly, not much else. I leave Adult Beginners with a C.
All right, Joe?
Yeah, I agree that what Justin said is pretty accurate. It's a pretty standard story. But I felt that the comedy was held up by some great performances. I liked everybody in the cast. I thought they sold it pretty well. I thought a lot of the comedy worked in terms of just the situations, some of the situational comedy. But there was also some good dramatic elements as well. I don't think it was particularly, mind blowing. But I thought it worked overall. I found it enjoyable. I thought Cannonball was great, honestly, and something a little bit different. I was also kind of surprised by the age of the cast too. They were a little older than I thought they were, honestly.
Okay.
I don't know why. Just for some reason, I thought
Interesting.
McHale is actually older than I thought he was. I guess just by that youthful comedy that I'm used to seeing him play. But I don't know. It was just something that was interesting when I was going through the cast. But no, I thought it was good. I enjoyed the story overall. Thought it had a good message. I'll leave it with a B.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like Adult Beginners is a fairly basic slice of life character study. Yeah. But I do think it missed the boat by not having any real moments that spark, like in other recent films in the same vein, like This Is Where I Leave You or The Skeleton Twins. Mm-hmm. The most comedic part of the movie is in a scene with a character we only see once again in the whole movie. That's when Nick Kroll goes to the store and he meets his old friend from high school. I thought that kind of was pretty funny, but that was really the only part I laughed like out loud at. The dramatic parts are fine, but I just don't think there's enough to them. I agree with Justin that they're very safe, but the performances are all pretty decent. I'm not really a huge Nick Kroll fan, but I thought he did a good job. He wrote the script.
What else has he been in?
He had his own show on Comedy Central. He's in The League. He's a stand-up comic. Movie-wise, nothing.
Okay,
I don't think I've ever seen him in a movie.
So he basically went the Dane Cook route.
Well,
did
Dane Cook write his movies?
I doubt. Yeah, probably not. But
so no, he wrote this movie, so I'll give him credit for that. It's not a super great script, but it worked okay. I'm sort of in between you guys. I give it a B minus. Thought it worked for what it was, but it was incredibly generic and quite safe. I do agree that Bobby Cannavale gave a great performance. Rose Byrne seemed a little off here, though, to me.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I usually love her, and she was just so average here.
And she left a lot to be desired in this. I'm not quite sure what was going on there.
I just don't think that the script is
That tight.
Inspired.
that tight.
Yeah.
And, they didn't seem like any of the scenes were, like, improvised or anything. I'm sure she stuck, to the script as it was. And it was okay. It got enough of the job done. But I would say that's probably why her performance wasn't quite up to par. I mean, her character was okay.
Oh no, it wasn't a bad character. It was just there wasn't enough there.
Yeah, there really wasn't. I liked a couple of the scenes she had at work. She had some exchanges with her boss.
Those were good.
Those were pretty good as well. So you guys aren't real familiar with Nick Kroll then?
Not very, no.
No.
Okay, he's
Meh.
not great. Yeah, I mean, some people like him. His show was decently popular on Comedy Central, but
Still going?
no, it just wrapped up last year. But it lasted like 3, maybe even 4 years.
Okay.
And he was on the Franco roast. He was kind of funny on that. But yeah, this is his big foray into movies, I guess.
I see.
I would say it missed the mark a bit.
Just a wee bit, but I
Yeah.
gotta give him props for writing and starring, so.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, his dramatic scenes actually is, I think, what worked for me the best.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, oddly enough.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was laugh out loud funny for the most part.
Right.
But I did enjoy the dramatic elements.
Which actually is sort of a Dane Cook thing, because I don't think Dane Cook's very funny. But when he went a bit dramatic in Dan in Real Life, I thought he actually did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the
the
path
trick.
to go.
Sometimes it's something you don't expect.
No. Well, Seth MacFarlane. Let's get with the drama.
I'm telling you, he should legitimately try it because
You
his
want it to happen.
comedic movies are not working.
They're terrible lately.
They're not working.
I would
Okay,
say.
Seth MacFarlane's Foxcatcher 2. Let's make it happen.
Do it.
There you go.
Let's go.
Do it. Starring Nick Kroll and Seth MacFarlane.
Why not? Why not?
I'd watch it.
All right. Well, we're going to move into our top 5 now. This is inspired by Hell and Back. What a movie.
We're
Probably
sorry, listeners.
Won't be appearing on either of our lists here. But this is the top 5 movies where people go to hell, or where hell is some sort of locale in the film. So, Joe, why don't we start with you on this?
Well, I guess I'll start off with an honorable mention, and I can't really put it in the top 5 for reasons I can't tell you about, Dan.
Okay.
But that would be Jacob's Ladder.
Ooh, okay.
So, yes, I think we'll just leave it at that.
Thank you for your honesty, Joe.
Someday I'll see it.
Justin agrees. Can't quite make it to that top
Okay.
5. But it's definitely worth mentioning. My number 5 is pretty obvious. I mean, it's Hellboy. Where,
There you
where
go.
the King of Hell superhero himself goes to hell briefly, but it's kind of the center of the mythology of the movie. It's funny. I feel like this is a movie that I don't think I would like as much as I do, but I feel like it's always on TV, and I always end up putting it on and watching it till the end. And I find it very enjoyable. I think it's honestly Ron Perlman at his best. I'm still waiting for Hellboy 3. Maybe Crimson Peak will do well enough that Del Toro can just do it finally. But then again, Hellboy 2 was kind of mixed. But number 4, another comic book movie. Kind of surprising, I guess, that's Constantine. It's definitely certainly derivative from the comic book character, but actually I don't really like him that much. So once again, DC syndrome debunked. I think we can agree. Really it is.
Not entirely, but I'll let you have it.
He's nothing like he is in the comic, and I like it.
Yeah, okay.
So, there you go. I mean, I think
Keanu Reeves, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually like Keanu Reeves in the movie. I think he's decent. I think but what stands out the most and why it's on this list is because really the scenes in hell are really, really stand out, I think, visually. Very interesting and even a little scary. Number 3 is What Dreams May Come. I've always liked this movie. I thought it had a great style and just a very, very unique portrayal of heaven and hell. And their version of hell really stands out to me as being strangely likely. I don't know why. I thought it was very, very powerful the way that was done. And my number 2 is one I mentioned before. It's Event Horizon, kind of a sci-fi flick with a ship going to hell and bringing back something with it. Quite terrifying and a cult classic, but definitely one I'd like to show you guys sometimes. I did mention that it did scare me as a child because I was too young to probably be watching it.
That is true. Yes, I do remember that.
It was very disturbing, but probably one of the better Sam Neil's when he does horror. I like when he does horror.
Well, I will kick mine off with number 5.
Okay.
And that is Little Nicky.
I knew that was going to be on there.
Well, because I haven't seen a lot of horror movies. So for me,
Hey, if
my
it
sort of go-tos are more of the comedic vein,
if
let's
it
say.
makes you feel better, I did consider it.
Honestly, Little Nicky is one of the last really good in the silly Adam Sandler repertoire. Like, Mr. Deeds is good. I wouldn't call that more silly, though. Same thing with, like Longest Yard. I mean, it's not really silly Sandler.
It's fairly silly.
It's not as bad as everyone made it out to be.
No, Little Nicky's actually pretty funny. I mean, you got some good characters there. Kevin Nealon's very funny in it. The reason I actually saw it was because of Reese Witherspoon being in it. Mm-hmm. And I really had no interest in it because I heard it was so terrible. But then I watched it and I was like, actually, this is kind of funny.
The general concept is really funny.
Yeah, I certainly didn't mind it. Number 4 for me is What Dreams May Come. Now, this is actually so low on the list because I have not actually seen it since its theatrical release. So it's been a good 15 years.
96, 97?
I think it was early 2000s, right? Maybe it was late 90s.
That was late 90s. 98.
Yeah, I think late 90s.
But the one thing I do remember, other than the popping colors and the very good Robin Williams performance, was its unique depictions of both heaven and hell. And so I had to put that one on the list.
And Cuba.
And a great Cuba Gooding performance as per usual.
Yeah.
At that time period.
Before Snow Dogs.
Before Snow Dogs. Number 3 for me is Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Now, this is another one I haven't seen in a good long time, but it certainly sticks with you. The original title was Bill and Ted Go to Hell, which they only really briefly go to hell, but
it's pretty
they have Satan with them the entire movie. So
he's great, though.
He's fantastic.
And actually, it's Death, I believe.
No, you're right. They call him Death.
It's technically Death, but
you're right.
Yeah, it's similar.
It's a pretty worthy follow-up to the original. We've talked about the original on a couple different lists, Joe.
As sequels go, when you're trying to match up to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bogus comes pretty close.
It actually does.
Which is really
not a bad movie.
Surprising.
Yeah. Number 2 for me is Drag Me to Hell. This is the one horror film on my list. A great movie to me. I thought that the whole concept was good. It really it was like one of those creepy crawly movies. Like, I watched it not in theaters, but still on DVD. It was very stuff happened. Have you ever seen it, Joe?
I avoided it because of the title.
Oh, okay. Too generic?
Yeah, it just sounded stupid.
All right,
I'll be
well-
honest.
Wow. I
And
thought
Evil
about
Dead doesn't.
I thought about running it for Horror Month too.
well,
I forgot you never saw it.
Well,
Joe.
the thing is, you got to remember, like, typically I avoided generic horror movies, and
Right.
But Sam Raimi.
also this was a couple years after Spider-Man. Not
But
really
Return
caring.
to Horror.
This was before I watched Evil Dead, so I didn't really care.
Oh.
Yeah, my first experience was, Spider-Man, like most people our age group, I would imagine. I'm pretty sure you saw Spider-Man before Evil Dead, right? 2002?
I think my parents would be concerned with me if
I would
Yes.
think.
So
Yeah.
come on, you're right. No, I mean, you're right, Sam Raimi. But literally, my association, like, I think the next time I thought about Sam Raimi popping was, I think Oz Great and Powerful. Like,
Yeah.
the Spider-Man guy. So yeah, Evil Dead was more recent for me.
Well, hell itself is a pretty minor component in this film.
What?
At least going there, but the whole movie is about hell and the curse that is on this girl and everything. So
I see.
I think it's certainly valid for the list.
That is an extremely underrated movie.
It really is. It sort of came and went.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. Justin, how about for you?
All right, this was fun. But like I said while we were warming up, there were a lot on this list that
Tough.
it was hard to say if the storyline actually pertained to them being in hell. Like the example I always came back to was Corpse Bride. They're in some degree of an afterlife, but whether or not it constitutes as hell, I'm not sure.
I actually sort of thought briefly about Book of Life in that
Me too,
regard.
yeah, same deal.
But then again, I think when we think of hell, we think traditional Christian hell, where it's like
Right.
terrible.
Fire and brimstone.
Yeah, generally speaking.
Yeah. But to kick mine off with an honorable mention, the Amityville Horror, the original. Now, in the case of this one, minor spoiler, a major reveal is the fact that right under the house is the gateway to hell. However, they do not in fact go in there, and like I said, it doesn't really show up or play a big deal until midway through Act 2. So, wanted to... Still figured it was worth noting. Number 5. Drag Me to Hell.
What a movie.
Guess so.
I mean, say what you will about Spider-Man 3, Joe. This was a surprisingly good PG-13 horror.
That was PG-13.
That was PG-13, believe it or
I
not.
think on DVD it was unrated because
They did go unrated
I was gonna say I don't think the one I saw was PG-13.
with a lot of really solid, dark humor, and yet doesn't compromise the tension. It's very Evil Dead 2 in that regard, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought Banks did a sensational job. Justin Long is Justin Long, but in this case, he does Justin Long well.
Always the hating.
Can't go
Is it
wrong.
hate for just saying he plays the same character in every movie?
Hey,
If you hate it, yes, I would consider it hate.
To keep on going. Number 4, Hellraiser. This is one that I feel like people could come after me for because hell is not necessarily a big deal, but it is a plot component, and one character
it's fine.
does in fact go to hell, as revealed fairly shortly on in the movie. But
It's pretty.
So then why wouldn't it count?
It
Sounds
that's
like
why-
it's
because
pretty revolving
because in
around
part
hell.
2 they are quite literally in hell.
Hellraiser.
In the first one, it's main villain who is not Pinhead.
Yes, Paul.
Went to hell, came back, and is trying to get back and is
Justin.
trying to become mortal.
It's okay.
If hell appears in the movie, it counts.
It's a pretty.
And if Hellraiser 1's better than Hellraiser 2, then go
I
for
haven't
it.
seen Hellraiser 2, so
You haven't.
I have not.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. Literally, when people are summoned, Xenobites, they basically are in hell. Temporarily.
Yeah.
So it's hell is in the.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, you're
it's
fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. Hellraiser. It's called that for a reason.
Definitely terrifying concept of hell.
Yeah.
Definitely terrifying characters. Really creepy atmosphere as per usual with 80s, 90s Clive Barker, and hopefully someday the mythology will get back on track, but who knows when that day will come. My number 3, The Devil's Advocate. This is a movie that one of my closest friends dragged me basically kicking and screaming to watch, and I owe him so much for that because it was
It's a good movie.
I've heard.
it was a surprisingly good movie.
Another Keanu, if I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Keanu actually being half decent acting wise too. Yes, Joe, they do go to hell.
I don't know. I always thought it was kind of vague what happened there, but I'll take your word for it.
But I mean, Al Pacino, great devil.
Probably the best devil.
He'd probably be like number 3 or number 2 for me.
Vigo?
No, probably Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus Devil, actually.
Oh, okay.
But great characters, really cool morality tale, and just the right amount of tension. It's suspenseful, but you can't really call it a thriller. It messed up things happen, but you can't really call it a horror film. It's a really interesting blend, and I think that that really hits it home. And my number 2, Hellboy. Joe, I can't agree with you more, sir. This is quite possibly the most painfully underrated superhero franchise of all time.
I don't know if it's really underrated because, like I said, I feel like people come back to Hellboy all the time.
It's got a cult following, but I feel like when most people think superhero movies, they think the Avengers and Batman.
Well, for something that's kind of more independently based, it's pretty awesome.
And what I love about Hellboy is it should be this super dark storyline, and they find so many ways to have fun with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time we see Hellboy in the first movie, he's surrounded by cats.
Yeah, nice cats.
Might have to see that movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It's like 1 and 2 are extremely witty. 1's definitely better, but I'm definitely with Perlman campaigning for a third film.
Yeah, I mean, it should definitely happen.
It's got to happen because the franchise deserves more.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, what is your number 1?
What is it?
Bill and Ted's?
No, I thought about it, but they go so briefly.
Some horror movie, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
It's a horror movie. My number 1 is Hellraiser.
Okay.
Because it's
Nice.
one of my favorite horror movies, and hell is definitely a significant component, and it's very horrific. Some great effects. Really, it is. And just a really awesome story and a really cool mythology. Really, really quite terrifying, but also very epic and engaging. I think very few horror movies you can really say that about. Really, to be on that epic level of scale, especially by Hellraiser 2, it gets like
Super messed
it gets
up.
like what's going on here. But no, a really excellent movie, and definitely for raising hell, can't get much more blatant than that.
Wow. All right. Well, my number 1 is South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
It's acceptable.
Joe probably figured that.
It's good. Yeah.
I mean, it's a classic.
It's very classic.
I mean, all of the sequences really in Hell are very funny, and it carried over into episodes then of the TV show, which were very funny.
Little boy, you're going to hell.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love it? Their portrayal of Satan is very funny, and obviously the Satan Saddam. I almost said Bin Laden.
Close.
too old for that. But yeah, the whole Saddam Satan love triangle thing is hilarious. It's a movie that probably also doesn't get talked about as much as it should.
I think it's in the same camp as Hellboy. Like, maybe it might not seem that obvious, but people know it. People like it. They come back to it.
Yeah. It's
It's hard to talk about the movie specifically when there's hundreds of episodes of the show that are also talked about, I guess.
Well,
That's fair.
Kind of
It's
surprised
definitely
about it. In that sense, I am kind of surprised about it because I always wondered, like, I guess South Park must have been a pretty big hit off the bat because they led with the movie
Huge.
so early. I'm almost like, it's kind of like opposite of The Simpsons.
Right.
Like, you
Simpsons
think,
waited a good 20 years.
you think that South Park would have had a movie maybe like in the mid-2000s, when like at their peak, so I don't know. That was pretty interesting timing.
Although, I mean, the whole hook of South Park was that it was so filthy. So it almost begged for an R-rated feature.
I suppose.
All right, Justin, how about for you?
Well, lo and behold, mine is also South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
I figured.
I mean, quite possibly most hilariously twisted version of hell on film. I think South Park, the movie, is quite possibly one of the funniest films of all time. At least in like 90s, early 2000s, what have you. The whole Satan thing was great. I thought the callbacks to his character in later episodes were fantastic.
Yeah,
and I think it's also a reminder that they really do got to do another movie, because I feel like Hollywood is truly missing out on their talent.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Because Team America basically broke them.
It's a little different.
I don't think that's true.
It kind of is. The whole like production difficulties they had pulling that off.
People like Team
drove them
America,
crazy.
though.
Oh no, it was well received and it made money. It was just they after that they were like, we were kind of iffy about doing more movies.
I feel like they'd have the
I
money
don't
by
think it
now.
did make money. I think it was a bomb.
It was a bomb?
However, though,
full follow.
apparently a couple years back I read that Paramount secured the rights for another South Park movie, so I have to imagine one may be on the horizon in the not too distant future.
Listen, they do whatever they want, man.
Well, that's fair.
I mean, they do the episodes. They still write every episode of the show.
That's impressive.
And then they wrote the Book of Mormon.
That's true.
You know, I mean, look, if they want to do a movie, they'll do one. It has nothing to do with, they are broken from Team America. Maybe at the time they were disappointed in how hard it was, but this is doing the show in a movie. I mean, it's not puppets.
I mean, at these
it's
days,
just animation. So yeah, it'd be much easier to do another movie than do Team America again.
Well, no.
You know. All right. Well, good lists, and that brings us to another horror feature, and that's the old classic for Horror Month. And my pick was The Birds. I went pretty solidly classic on this because obviously you guys can pick some more obscure titles that maybe I had never even heard of. Mimic, maybe I had heard of before. I guess I had heard of Mimic, but I certainly never had seen it until
it's not the most
you brought it to the table.
Or Nightbreed, for that matter.
And so rather than do a choice like a Scream or a Ring, I went super old school with it and chose The Birds. This is obviously the Hitchcock classic from 1963. It stars Tippi Hedren as young socialite Melanie, who runs into a lawyer named Mitch, played by Rod Taylor, at a bird shop. He wants to purchase a pair of lovebirds for his sister, recognizes Melanie from a previous encounter, so as a joke, he pretends that he thinks she works there. She gets angry, but becomes intrigued about this man, so she finds out his address and delivers the lovebirds directly. She becomes close with his family, as well as Mitch's ex, a school teacher played by Suzanne Plachette. But suddenly birds start to randomly attack townspeople, first seagulls, then sparrows, then crows, and soon the town is up in arms. And some even blame Melanie, saying that it only happened when she got into town. Now, upon originally seeing the movie years ago, I did not like the way it ended. It felt like it was a cop-out. But this time around, I really saw the ambiguity and multi-layered character arcs and how they make for really some of the spookiest stuff in the Hitchcock canon. As for the film on the whole, it is a much more chilling film than a lot of the director's work, and it's also very sophisticated in a way. The performances are good. Now, unfortunately, because of its special effects-heavy nature, it doesn't quite hold up with some of the less effects-heavy Hitchcock movies, but the suspense absolutely does with some of the most horrifying images in a film made before my lifetime, certainly. It's got a great build-up to the action. It starts out, really the first, I would say half hour is sort of just getting to know the characters, getting to know the town.
Build-up.
And what a build-up it is when those birds start coming. Joe and I mentioned while we were watching it about the man with his eyes pecked out.
Yeah.
I mean, that was brutal to see.
Mm-hmm.
That was surprising. But I leave The Birds with an A. Joe?
I mean, literally,
what can you say?
Dan, there's nothing else I can say that you didn't say. The only thing, literally, I agree with everything you said.
Thank you.
Really, I mean, I'll just make it that easy. The only thing I could say to add to it is, for me, there was great build-up, maybe a little slow at points, but it's minor. I leave with an A as well. Okay. There's really nothing else I can add to that. That was perfectly stated.
All right. Well, thank you. Justin?
Psycho's a hard act to follow for the likes of Alfred Hitchcock. But while The Birds isn't quite as good, it's not without components to admire. Hitch as a director has a brilliant sense of how to make the most seemingly innocuous animals downright vicious with a more than unnerving sense of space, with one truly unforgettable scene at a playground, and easily some of the most gruesome, by 60s horror standards, visuals with some top-notch editing and tricks like that. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I think Hedren, just as an actress, is just not up to par with some of the other actresses in his filmography. But even some of the more sillier stuff like this, or North by Northwest, which I also think is a fantastic movie, is far and away better than some of the more current directors' best work. I leave this one with an A-.
Yeah, I admit it's probably not his best. I thought Psycho was a little too on the nose for Horror Month.
No, that's fair. And I mean, what I like about this one, as well as almost any of Hitchcock's movies, is there's always things to come back to and notice and reevaluate. Much like with your overall takeaway from this one.
Yeah, the first time I was dissatisfied with how it ended. It just seemed so bizarre and I thought there was going to be another scene afterwards, but then the more I sort of learned about Taylor's character, or I guess maybe not even really learned about him, but just sort of the mystery surrounding his character, I really actually respect the ending of this film. Certainly for the time period, I think. I mean, I guess Hitch was sort of known for that anyway.
I'm telling you guys, it's basically just kind of a subtle commentary on property distribution.
It really is.
I mean, it kind of is.
97 Homes is what it was originally called.
Yeah, didn't have quite as many as yeah, but I'm sure Shannon negotiated, like, look, you got a couple days to get out. If not, the birds are going to be here. Deal.
They're going to eat your house.
They're going to eat you and your house if you don't. Either way. So here's your $3,000 for the key. Go ahead.
I thought Headroom was okay. I agree that she's probably not up to snuff with
Janet Leigh.
Some of Hitchcock's more famous. Yeah, Janet Leigh would be, I guess, the obvious go-to. But I thought she had, some good chemistry with Rod Taylor.
Yeah.
Her screams were a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
Well, they're a little over the top, I think.
It's also the 60s.
But it's the 60s. It's the birds.
Yeah.
Being attacked by birds. Come on.
There's only ways it's typically done.
True.
They don't reel it in too much for horror back then.
No, they didn't.
They don't.
But Rod Taylor, always great.
Especially when he goes back in time.
Well, that's my favorite part. He should have gone back in time before she got to the town.
I'm pretty sure there's an unofficial sequel where he goes back in time to find out what actually caused it and then take them out before it happened.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why the last scene is what it is.
Exactly.
All right. Well, up next, we have Barefoot in the Park for our Oscar A to Z. That's going to close the show. It was a 1967 film nominated for just one Oscar, and that's Mildred Natwick for Supporting Actress. Joe?
Oh, I see. Well, Barefoot in the Park is from 1967. It's a comedy, and it stars Jane Fonda as Corey and Rob Redford as Paul. And it's apparently based on a play by Neil Simon, and it focuses on these newlyweds and their adventures living in this tiny six-floor walk-in apartment in Greenwich Village. Stuffed shirt Paul is a hard-working young attorney just starting his practice. With his spontaneous, and I mean very spontaneous pride, with so much energy it's ridiculous, Corey is determined to create a romantic environment for them with no heat, but there is a hole in the ceiling and tons of oddball neighbors. And Paul has to deal with some alcoholism, and there's this whole running gag about whether or not they're going to go running barefoot in the park to, comment on spontaneity in general. And it's basically these two trying to balance out their ridiculous chemistry. I guess you got Redford being someone a little more restrained, with Fonda being just kind of outgoing and energetic.
Yeah.
And I think that this film had a lot of great chemistry between them. I thought a lot of the comedy was very witty. A lot of the lines were, I think, very advanced. I thought that overall the comedy was basically filled with a lot of great commentary as well. I thought it flowed very well. It was very entertaining for the most part. Maybe a little bit of build up towards the beginning. Like it kind of, there were some scenes in particular with her mother and this other subplot with this gentleman she's involved with that I thought could have gone somewhere else that it didn't. Mm-hmm. I thought it wasn't exactly spaced out as well as it could have been. But on the whole, I thought it was a very enjoyable film and quite a surprise once again. Leave it with an A-.
Okay. Justin?
Redford and Fonda together are kind of akin to me as eggs and ketchup. It can work, but to more than a handful of people, it's going to come across as a little off-putting. Barefoot in the Park's clearly focusing on relatable dilemmas. One we noticed near the end definitely seemed to draw some inspiration towards a major comedic moment in this year's Trainwreck. And the two are fun to watch together. But once it gets going, the problem is the sillier it gets, the harder it is to get back into the serious, which is really where the big stuff happens. But because it's being so playful and ridiculous at times, the shift is just a struggle to get to and find that balance. It all plays out fairly well. The performances are good, even though I think we can all agree Fonda's character was a little bit over the top and unbelievable at times, but but it was a fun watch. I leave this one with a B+.
Yeah, it's really fun to see these established actors who we primarily know for their more recent work as older people, as these young, carefree kids getting married, fighting over silly things. But one thing Neil Simon always gives his characters is personality, and that is certainly on display here with Barefoot. Fonda's craziness and penchant for the over-the-top drama, as Justin mentioned, may not always be likable, and at times I really was rooting for Redford to pull the trigger on that divorce. But But the movie really has all the hallmarks of great Simon works like The Odd Couple and Biloxi Blues. It's got relatability and realism, and most of all, humor. Now, it is certainly dated, but I think that the characters remain universal. I think, the themes explored here by young couples, maybe, one that's more business-minded and one that's more carefree. I think that is fairly universal, and as Justin mentioned, something happens in this movie that they sort of go to in Trainwreck earlier this year, so obviously those themes are still hitting us in cinema. I thought it was a good watch. I leave it with a B+. What a great Fonda performance.
Yeah.
The second one for the A to Z.
That's right.
We had her as the nun.
With the Randy.
Oh, that's right.
I forget what that was called.
1980.
Yeah, it was from 1980. All about the nun or something.
The one.
Agnes of God.
That's it.
That's what it was. Yeah.
That was an interesting one.
That was interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Very different movie.
Much different from this, for sure. I do admit that her character can be a bit grating.
Borderline cartoonish at times.
Yeah, borderline cartoonish, I would say. Yeah, it's interesting, Joe. I feel like that extra stuff is probably in there. I do agree that maybe some of it could have been lifted out. But since it did come from the play, I feel like Simon's plays can be a bit long-winded, so I'm sure that the play version is probably over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and so
doesn't surprise me.
To sort of get it all, or at least most of it, onto the film, I guess they sort of had to go with that. I mean, the whole neighbor thing was all right.
It was okay.
But I agree. Certainly, the best parts were when the two of them were either sparring or, being lovey with each other or whatever. They're certainly the standouts.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the show this week. And Horror Month is about to come to a close. Next week will be our last one, and then we'll get back into another month of regular old classics. And then for December, it'll be the holiday old classic month. If you have ideas for any of those that you would like to let us know about, go ahead and do that. The Facebook group is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. The Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. And of course, you can always comment right here on the YouTube video. And that's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.